All right, what is up, bro? I got some yapping I want to get off of my chest. I feel like from generation to generation, the mindset towards the government keeps changing and it keeps changing for the worst. And it's gotten so bad. I feel like Gen Z is in an information war, bro. Like nobody really talks about it. Nobody talks about how Gen Z is in like an actual information war. And what does that mean? Well, the Google definition for information war is the strategic use of information technology and media to disrupt, deceive, or destroy an adversary's information functions while protecting one's own, often aiming to manipulate public perception or decision making. And then it goes on and talks about propaganda, cyber attacks, all that crap. But yeah, dude, I feel like if there's anyone who has to like deal with that the most is probably Gen Z. And it's getting pretty bad. And what I like, bro, what am I talking about? I'm talking about like, I feel like 20 years ago, it wasn't really a thing where you could be 15 and then like all of a sudden these files get dropped and basically your president, whether you believe it or not, is like incorporated with like a sex ring. And I'm talking about like Epstein files and all this shit, okay? Like, I don't know, bro. What I'm trying to say is 20 years ago, that shit would be way harder to believe than right now. And like I said, bro, from generation to generation, it's kind of different because, okay, I'm like almost 20 at this point. So let's just break it down a little bit. Obviously, every generation of people are pretty much growing up in a different America. Obviously, it's the same place, it's the same town, but even in the past 50 years, even 20, like social media and the internet and the technology has advanced so much where things are like, I don't know, dude, they're just moving faster than ever. And I just feel like what a lot of kids or maybe young adults don't realize is that if their grandparents are like 70, bro, they were born in the 50s, dude. 1950s, and the Vietnam War was going on for about 25 or 20 years roughly. I don't know the exact dates, whatever, but roughly 20 years the Vietnam War was going on. So they could have been like born in 51 and that would make them roughly like 73, 74. And they could have been born, and then if in a few years when they're like 5 a war starts, and then give it like, I don't know, bro, like 15 years when they're 21 or 22, they literally could have got drafted into Vietnam. So obviously, when you have a generation who gets drafted into a war, whether they like it or not, I feel like the general census is they're all kind of gonna like agree that yeah, the government, we're kind of just doing what we have to for the government, and hopefully our government's just doing the right thing. And then the 80s kids come around, all right, my parents, okay, a lot of Gen Z's parents, the 80 kids, their parents may or may not have been drafted. I just want to point out real quick, Trump was born like a few months after the nukes were dropped. So yeah, just to give it like a real perspective, that means he was literally born like less than a year after World War II ended. And that kind of just shows that like I feel like a lot of people's perspective, I don't know, dude. I feel like a lot of the way people look at time is like messed up. They think it like World War II was like 300 years ago or something. I'm just like, dude, it really wasn't that long ago. It was not even 100 years. We're looking at like 80 years. So a lot of your grandparents could have talked to their parents about maybe they were in World War II. Maybe they had to actually go fight. And so, I guess, I don't know, dude, information just doesn't really get passed down. I guess parents don't really talk to their kids about that. We kind of let the schooling system do that. And then I feel like things get kind of misconstrued. But yeah, basically back to my point, dude. Different generations grow up with different perspectives, I guess, of the government. They grow up in different, almost Americas. Obviously, the people in power more or less the same. It's changing, but I feel like the ideals, they kind of are mostly still there. America as a whole is still there. It's not the point. But basically, kids born today, like they look around, they talk to each other, and they're like, yeah, of course we're run by a bunch of satanic pedophiles. Of course that's who in charge of that. Of course that's who in charge of our government. Of course that's the people like ruling over us, the people dictating our laws and stuff. Whereas I feel like somebody born in the 50s, give it 20 years, they're like 20, and that's the 70s. I feel like that's not really something they would have been saying. They would have been like, we should, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't be in Vietnam or whatever. We really probably shouldn't have, but maybe that was probably the big talking point. And then, that's it. They kind of grew up during the Cold War as well. But that was the thing, like, oh, Russia is the enemy and stuff. Like nobody was really, I guess, paying attention to what their own government's like actually doing within confined spaces and closed doors and shit. And then you got the 80s kids, okay, my parents. And then I feel like a lot of them kind of that's like, we're talking about like, rock and roll and stuff. Kids kind of grew up starting to get a little rebellious and stuff. Well, obviously they still love their parents or whatever, but they kind of grow up, and maybe it's like a little bit like of a worse perspective of the government, but not totally like, oh, we're run by satanic pedophiles. Like maybe more of like we can't rely on the government. They're not gonna do stuff for us. We just gotta like figure it out, bro. We gotta go. And it would be like, oh, I gotta pay taxes for this shit. That's the general complaint. But then, let's just skip the modern day. I feel like I could say that our government is run by satanic pedophiles, and some people are gonna disagree with that, and that's fine. You don't have to believe that, but you got to understand that there's people on the other side, bro. There's people who are gonna agree with that. There's people who strictly believe that, and that's just the thing. It's not like unfeasible at this point. I just feel like it's such a different way to like grow up looking at your government. And the point I'm trying to make is like these kids, like all the kids are like kind of anyone who like really pays attention and starts digging into it and looks at all like the conspiracy theories that end up being like mostly true at this point. All the kids are like, yeah, dude, of course things are fucked. Of course this is who is in power. But the thing is, you can't really like talk to your parents about it. They're just like, I don't want to say brainwashed, but they're in their ways, bro. They're not going to just like change. It's hard for like a 60-year-old probably to read through the Epstein files and like believe this shit was going on. Whereas a kid, it's like when you grow up and that's the only thing you kind of know, it's like, it's different, bro. Especially like I said, bro, Gen Z, we like a lot of us were kind of born a little bit after 9/11, but then all the conspiracy files, all the conspiracy theories start coming out about 9/11. And let's be real, bro, they're probably going to drop some files on 9/11 like in 50 years, and we're going to see like what really happened. But when kids grow up seeing that stuff, like I said, bro, information war, like everyone's saying different shit online, and you kind of just got to pick and choose what you believe. But when you grow up and that's the only thing you know, it's not as hard to believe that versus if you're like 50 and like your whole life it's been fine, but then we get attacked. And then, if someone starts saying we attacked ourselves, why would our government attack us? Operation Northwoods, by the way. But I feel like that'd be way harder for like a 50-year-old to grasp versus like a 15-year-old. And of course, the 15-year-old, they're not going to know everything, bro. They're kind of dumb, but they're going to like still be looking at it and like believing it and just being like, well, maybe it's not out of the question, because on the other hand, we have all these files coming out where everybody pretty much has dirt on them in the government. Like, what do I believe? So yeah, dude, I feel like that's just where Gen Z gets left out, is because, like I said, dude, anyone who like actually pays close attention to it and looks at all the, I guess, facts and the coincidences, at some point, you can't just chalk it up to coincidences, bro. At some point, it's like, what are you willing to give like the official story? You have to believe so many coincidences for it to like be true. And eventually what that just does to younger people is like, yeah, they're like, yeah, of course the people running us are fucking evil. Like, of course, like they're in power, that's what happens. It's like evil people just somehow they tend to get the power easier, bro, probably because they're selfish and they're willing to do terrible things to get in powerful places. And it's like, that just like makes sense to younger people, but telling that to like your grandpa or something, he'd probably be like, boy, what the hell are you talking about, boy? And in a way, I feel like it's all just kind of on purpose. I feel like all it really does is just divide the people even more, and people start arguing about this shit, and then it turns into partisanship, like left versus right, when honestly a lot of the younger kids are starting to be like, at least me, dude, and I know people who are the same way. It's like, I don't even give a fuck anymore about left versus right. I feel like that shit's outdated, okay? I feel like two parties cannot accurately represent fucking 300, 400 million, I can't even talk, bro. 350 million people, I feel like, can't really be categorized into just two parties. And then whatever your party does, you have to like back them so hard. You can't have any like giving room where they may have fucked up. It's just totally like, yep, that's my party, that's my team, let's go. It's like a football team. And I feel like, dude, Bad Bunny just had a halftime show or whatever. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't watch it. I'm not gonna like be rude to Bad Bunny. I don't know. I wouldn't have even understand the halftime show if I watched it. So, whatever, fuck it. But I feel like that causes like more outrage than the actual fucking Epstein files coming out. And let's just look at it at face value, bro. The fact that these files even exist should be proof enough that like, yeah, something went awry somewhere in the government. Something is fucked up and something should be done about it. And the whole thing is like a classic case of we investigated ourselves and we found nothing wrong. Obviously, the younger people aren't going to fucking believe that. But, the older you get, I feel like the more you just kind of give in and you don't even give a fuck anymore. It's like, whatever. I don't know, dude. But like I said, I feel like the whole thing is like just causing division anyway. And then you have like this whole halftime show. I don't know if that's supposed to be some sort of big, this is how skeptical I am, dude. I don't know if that's supposed to be how like some sort of big distraction or something. And to be honest, like it's working well. I feel like, people are getting so upset at who's performing the fucking halftime show. And like, I get that's something you can care about and like, talk about or whatever. I'm not saying you should just like ignore it, but on the other hand, it's like, I feel like there's just bigger things going on. I don't really give a fuck who's at the halftime show. I really don't even care about football that much. I don't watch it normally. It's the big game. I placed my bet and that's it. I didn't even watch the fucking second half. It was devastating. But I hope people like understand my point. The fact that these files even exist should like free you of any doubt in your mind that everything is like squeaky clean in the government. And it's like people just don't believe that. I don't know how. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein was already convicted of basically hiring underage girls to like, I gotta watch what I say on YouTube, but basically like to make them prostitutes and shit. And he was like outed as like a whole pedophile, and that was back in like 2000 something. And he gets a sweetheart deal, and he gets let off the hook, and then he gets like imprisoned or whatever. But he can literally leave for 12 hours a day, and then all he has to do is go back, sleep in the jail, and he could wake up the next morning and just go to his like whatever estate he wanted to. And yeah, dude, it's just like it's all over the place. And like I said, bro, it's like an information war versus like generation to generation. And I feel like the people really caught in the middle are people like my parents, bro. People like in the like 30 to 40 to like 50. I feel like they're really caught in the middle because I feel like they're kind of born honestly in the middle of it all. I feel like when shit really starts getting like released and stuff, that's when my generation was born, Gen Z. And we started seeing it like basically like, I guess if you want to say the average conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist is more like a younger person. More younger people are starting to believe like, yeah, things are fucked up. And it really feels like we're just the generation that only knows corruption at this point. And obviously, I don't think that's true. I think shit's been kind of fucked up for a while now. But I'm not going to go into like a whole history lesson. Basically, we're the only generation being born where this shit's like shoved in our faces. I mean, even if you don't even care about the whole like Epstein thing, I feel like the average person probably can't even scroll on their phone without getting something like on, I don't know about TikTok, but Instagram or Twitter. Like, I feel like the average person can't just scroll without getting some of it shoved in their face. So it's like at some point you kind of have to look at it. You kind of have to like at least get an understanding of what's going on. But yeah, I don't want to let this video run on too long. I want to dive into more topics, but to be honest, I just, I don't want the video to be too long. So, that's just where I am. I feel like we're all divided, and I feel like, bro, you're like actively in an information war, and you just have to be careful what you choose to believe. And if you really want to like look at what's going on, just always like question what you see and always just like go to the source, I guess the primary source, like go to where like things first came out and just like take a look for yourself, dude. Like, and just don't let someone else make your fucking opinions for you, because I feel like nobody really has their own opinions about anything anymore. I feel like everyone just gets their opinions formed by like other people online and stuff. And just I don't know, dude, be careful.